A scathing bombshell report on the NFL dropped today, and it revealed some very interesting information about the biggest blunder, or one of the biggest blunders, in Denver Broncos franchise history. Now, the information that came out today does not have any current ramifications for the Denver Broncos, but it does sort of bring closure and it ties a bow around this situation. And of course, I am talking about the Russell Wilson trade and in particular the subsequent contract extension. So, the report that came out today was from independent journalist Pablo Torre. I want to go ahead and bring in this article here from NFLTradeRumors.co, which is a really good aggregator. Essentially, the NFL Players Association filed a grievance against the NFL, alleging collusion between the owners after Deshaun Watson was given his fully guaranteed deal by the Cleveland Browns. And here is where Russell Wilson comes into play. So per the grievance, in initial talks with the Broncos prior to the trade, prior to Wilson even coming to Denver, he asked for a 7-year, $350 million deal that was 100% fully guaranteed. So that's the first nugget. The Denver Broncos could have had an even worse situation if Wilson had gotten what he was initially asking for. He was asking for a mega deal of epic proportions that would have surpassed even the Deshaun Watson deal. That is something that obviously I'm really glad Denver avoided, knowing how the situation played out, but it could have been even worse for the Broncos. He testified Denver seemed open to the idea, but that 10 days later it felt like they got cold feet. However, the document notes that it didn't seem like his agent shared that understanding, and there were overall complications with the sale of the Broncos to new ownership, the Walton Penner ownership group, that pushed back the timeline for a new deal. It continues. Broncos salary negotiator Rich Hurtado said in an email to GM George Paton with notes for a discussion with new owner Greg Penner that they believed they had leverage in contract talks and did not foresee any other quarterback contract matching the precedent from the Deshaun Watson deal. Payton later texted Penner and told him that he had told Wilson's camp that the Watson deal was a non-starter, so the Broncos were never going to go into the realm of a fully guaranteed deal. It was a precedent that was set by the Cleveland Browns prior to these negotiations being started, and again, it was just somewhere that Denver was not willing to go. Cleveland was with Watson, and it blew up in their face. Penner's notes from that meeting included 2 years left on the contract, why not wait? Suggesting that Greg Penner entered the meeting with some doubt about signing Russell Wilson to an extension, which later proved to be valid. Remember, Greg Penner entering the Denver Broncos ownership did not have any background in sports whatsoever. His background was all business with Walmart. So he was approaching this from a business perspective, not really looking at it from the player's perspective. Remember, and I think this is important to remember for context for the situation, Russell Wilson waived a no-trade clause to be traded from Seattle to Denver. The extension was always going to be a part of him coming to Denver. He would not have waived that clause if it weren't for him getting an extension. And at the time, when this was done, pretty much everybody in the inner NFL circle felt that this was the right move and that extending Wilson was the right decision for the team. At the time, he was still viewed as a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, so that all does matter here for context. Obviously, hindsight is 20/20, and Greg Penner ultimately ended up being correct in his assumption here. And this also kills a pretty popular narrative that even I myself kind of perpetuated, that Greg Penner was the one who was ultimately behind extending Russell Wilson, but it seems that ultimately it was George Paton who was the one that was behind extending him. So I think that finally settles who the responsible party for this massive blunder is. Now, in my opinion, and in the opinion of the organization as well, George Paton has made several moves to correct that bad move, but it is at least worth noting here that George Paton is ultimately the responsible party for the Russell Wilson extension here in Denver. However, Penner's notes also includes Denver's rationale for a deal, which was to ensure Wilson was happy as well as to get ahead of any other talks and establish a precedent of not fully guaranteeing contracts like the Cleveland Browns did with the Deshaun Watson deal. Wilson's camp chose to submit a contract offer that was not fully guaranteed, but one that they believed was, quote, practically fully guaranteed. Emails from the Denver side noted that there's nothing in here that other owners will find off-market or just not fair like the Watson deal. An email from Penner said the guarantees are far less than the Watson deal, and if we can get this done, George Paton feels very good about it for us as a franchise and the benchmark that it sets versus the Deshaun Watson deal for the rest of the league. And again, that ended up paying off really well for the Denver Broncos because when they went to get out of the Russell Wilson deal, they were able to split the dead money into 2 years, and overall, the ramifications weren't that huge. The Denver Broncos came out on the other side okay. The Cleveland Browns wished that they could have gotten out of the Deshaun Watson deal like Denver did with Russ's deal, but every single dime of Watson's deal is fully guaranteed. Cleveland cannot get out of this deal. They basically have to pay him to not play for them. Well, the former heads of the NFL Players Association, both the lead boss, DeMaurice Smith, and the president, former Packers and Browns center J.C. Tretter, were upset, to say the least, that Russell Wilson didn't stand firm and secure a fully guaranteed deal. They said that Wilson was, quote, a wuss. I believe that came from Tretter's text. That definitely, again, that's something that you can discuss all you want, but the NFL Players Association is always going to stand by the interest of the players, and they wanted the precedent to get set for quarterbacks getting fully guaranteed deals. Cleveland had said it, they wanted Denver to continue it, and they wanted Russell Wilson to be firm in his decision to get a fully guaranteed deal. Again, thankfully for the Broncos, he wasn't firm in that, and yeah, man, this could have been a lot worse for the Denver Broncos than it ultimately was. Thankfully, they ended up standing pat in their decision to not give Russ a fully guaranteed deal, and ultimately, it was George Paton's decision to make this extension happen. And there was reservations from Greg Penner. So those are all things that we have learned from these reports. You can go ahead and continue to look into the document if you want to. It goes on and talks about some stuff with Kyler Murray and some stuff with Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. So if you guys are interested in that, I would highly recommend going and checking out the rest of the document. But we're just going to discuss things from the Broncos perspective and obviously this Russell Wilson perspective. And I think we ultimately did learn a lot here, and I like to hope that this is the last Russell Wilson video that I'm ever going to make on this channel. I'm hoping that he'll be benched by the time the Broncos play the Giants, and again, I hope I never have to mention the name Russell Wilson on this channel again, but this does, in my opinion, finally provide some closure to the Russell Wilson situation. Alright, Broncos country, let me know in the comment section below. How do you guys feel about all this information coming out? And do you think that George Paton has done enough to sort of right his wrong in regards to the Russell Wilson trade? Do you think that he's been able to overall correct the move? And I think that he's got the team on track. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts as always. Be sure to leave a like on this video as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos appear in your notification feed. I would really appreciate it, guys. Those are both free and easy ways to show your support. It helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out, and it helps us get seen by more and more members of Broncos country just like you and me. And until next time, guys, I'm your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.